Riots in Minneapolis, Minnesota because of the killing of George Floyd. Cuomo blames the nursing homes. What is Governor Whitmer of Michigan doing about nursing homes in the midst of COVID-19? Plus, can the deep state hang on until 2021? And Biden has another Bidenism coming up. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. It was troubling, to say the least, last night as the video was circulating all over social media of what was going on in Minneapolis. Now, I'm so frustrated. Yesterday, I was saying I think this is going to start another movement like we've seen in the past in the aftermath of violence involving a police officer. This case is a bad one. I mean, this is not a situation in which I feel like we have to get a lot more information before. Now, that's different from the legal process that the officer involved deserves. You know, even a mass murderer under our Constitution gets a legal process, my friends. Now, the officer's not a mass murderer, but you understand what I'm saying. Everyone gets gets their due process, gets a fair process. That said, the video is enough that this is a wrong that was done. People see this across the country, and they recognize how terrible it is. They understand that this requires justice. The officers have already been fired. The mayor of Minneapolis is almost in tears talking about the case. It's a gut punch to everybody I know who's watching it. I had, right-wing conservatives in the media texting me just to be like, did you see this video? This is terrible. And instead of viewing this, now look, there's going to be this game the media plays of pretending that protests and riots are kind of similar or you can't really differentiate. No, a protest is a constitutionally protected act. And the right to protest is something that we should all respect. Oh, that's right. Even when there's COVID-19, even when the government is telling you that they have some other compelling interest to prevent you from being able to protest, it is a constitutional right. They don't get to just suspend it because they're worried about the spread of COVID-19. They're not able to. They're not allowed to do that. Although they have been doing it. So, I mean, they shouldn't be able to do it is what I mean by this. And the protests in Minneapolis would certainly be warranted, although there's really no movement against justice for the family here of George Floyd. There's no movement of people that are saying, oh, well, this was... I have not heard a single person claim that this video was not terrible and that the officers should not be punished to the fullest extent of the law. What does looting have to do with any of this? Why do we have to pretend for some reason as a society that people going into a Target or going into an AutoZone? I mean, I was watching these videos circulating last night. This is in Minneapolis, not a place that you think of as high crime or a place that has to deal with problems like this. This is appalling to watch. You have these stores that are being looted and burned to the ground. People are actually burning them to the ground. There was one video of a guy running around during the looting with a chainsaw. And yet you have these social justice advocates and the people that make a living from fanning the flames of racial division and grievance, who, if not openly advocating for the looting, always find a way to make it seem less awful or to make it seem less completely unjustifiable by saying, well, people are rightly angry about this. You have a right to be angry. You don't have a right to burn down your own neighborhood. You don't have a right to destroy the property of individuals who have absolutely nothing to do with these cops and what they did. If you believe in justice and you think that individual actions are not the foundational, the central issue, that the individual either doing or not doing something is not the central issue of the justice system, you're opening up the possibility that anyone can be punished for anything, that any one of us can be a sacrifice to someone else's political anger or concerns or some other injustice, perhaps even a historical injustice. You could have your house burned down because of something that was done 50 or 100 or 200 years ago, unless individual agency, responsibility, and moral culpability are the foundation of our justice system and also our sense of what is right. I cannot be punished for the actions of another person. That's wrong. That's immoral. Destroying property of people, destroying property, burning down businesses, and we know this. You know this listening to me say it, and yet the media doesn't want to come down too harshly on these protesters. See, I just did it. Rioters. You got to make sure you keep these things separate. It's not rioting is not protesting. These are not the same, right? Holding up a placard is not the same thing as punching someone in the face. These are not the same. We don't get to pretend they are. So don't let the media get away with it, because they view particularly racial division as an opportunity to push ratings up, to push forward favored narratives, for a lot of posturing from multimillionaire news anchors and left-wing journalists all over the place to act like they care so much about oppressed minority communities and that they're the ones that really want justice in this situation. And anybody who's calling out the rioters, let's use the proper terminology, no one calls out the protesters. And I can totally understand people wanting to protest over what happened to George Floyd. Now it's come out that the officer in question, who had the knee on the neck of Floyd for over, I've seen as over 9 minutes. The video I watched was 5 minutes, but I've seen it said it was over 9 minutes. There are multiple complaints against him in the past. So the officer may well have been somebody who should have been disciplined beforehand. There is going to be huge liability for the city of Minneapolis. And I'm willing to bet right now that the family of George Floyd is going to get a very, very large payout in a civil suit as a result of this. I know that doesn't bring him back, but I'm just saying that no one is expecting this to go in any direction other than these cops, particularly the one cop who had his knee on his neck, are in a whole lot of trouble. And this is a terrible injustice. So what's with the looting? What do the looters think that they are showing? No, the looters are just using this as an excuse. It's an excuse. They're angry. They're not particularly angry about this. They're just angry in general. And so they want to destroy. They want to threaten. They want to ruin. And they're looking for some justification, some excuse in their own mind for this activity. I mean, it's terrible, especially given what the country's going through right now. You're burning down businesses. Those businesses employ people who are hoping to come back to work soon. Who knows what that's? It's awful to see this. And there's this video that's making the rounds of a woman coming out of a store, and she's in a wheelchair, and she's attacked by a mob of looters, and they spray a fire extinguisher on her, and the people are throwing things at her and hitting her. It's an elderly woman in a wheelchair. I think that the decision that was made to pull back the police in Minneapolis is wrong. I think that until we decide that you're going to enforce the law when it comes to burning down buildings, stealing en masse, I think that we're going to continue to see this. Law enforcement has a duty here. And to say, oh, it's too dangerous for my officers, so now is it if you get a mob together, they can break the law and cops don't want to have to do anything about it? Think about the implications of that. If one person does something illegal, the cops will, use force, escalate force. They'll hit you with a nightstick or with a baton. They'll mess you up, man. I mean, cops have to use force, have to use violence, and they will, in fact, not just draw their tasers. They'll draw their firearms if they have to. In this case, you're burning down buildings. They don't know if there's, with this kind of arson, that's a threat to human life. I mean, that's a felony. You don't know if there's someone asleep somewhere in that building. You don't know if there's someone who's trapped somehow inside, cleaning late at night, and these buildings are lit up in flames. No one knows. Arson's a very serious crime. Just stealing is a felony. Mob violence undermines society at its very core. And the Minneapolis cops just let them burn down the neighborhood? Really? Well, maybe people would be less likely to loot if looters were being hit with rubber bullets and wrestled to the ground and handcuffed. Now, you can tell me, Buck, don't do that. We just went through a couple of months here of cops arresting people for the crime of not wearing a mask in public, and in some cases wrestling them, throwing them face first into the cement. That happened here in New York. Arresting people in public parks for being with their kids because of stupid pseudoscience promoted by scared psycho libs who want Trump to lose, that you can't be in open air without a mask on. So, the cops have been able, they'll shut down businesses, they'll show up and do all this stuff. But looting, violence, threat to life, threat to property, cops in Minneapolis called away from the scene. Sorry, don't want to get too deep into this one. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's just caving to mob violence. Looting has nothing to do with justice. Looting is an injustice. Inherently, every time. It's not a little bit more okay. It's not a little bit less awful because people are upset. I'm upset about a lot of things. I'm not going to go burn down a store down the street to show my rage. What if I walked down the street and decided that I was just going to take a baseball bat and swing it at somebody's head because I'm upset about something? It's garbage. Anybody you hear out there who's downplaying this is a coward, is a phony, is someone who should not be listened to, and honestly should be condemned. Oh, there's anger about this. Yeah, you protest when there's anger. You don't destroy people's livelihoods. You don't threaten people and destroy property because you're upset. And even having to talk about it has nothing to do with that. This is just the exploitation of a circumstance by individuals acting collectively to express rage and do what they feel like, to act on an impulse that they've had that finally now they see an opening. And there needs to be much more aggressive pushback against this. This is where the cops have got to be willing to use force. What else are we going to say? Anytime somebody wants to burn down a neighborhood because they're upset about an incident involving race and the police, we're just going to allow that to happen. Look what's happened in Baltimore. Look what's happened in Ferguson, Missouri. And now it's happening in Minnesota. Unacceptable. This is an injustice, and the people who are not calling it out for that, like I said, they're cowards. They're not worthy of your time.
So basically, you've seen the records that cops keep, and cops are a lot less likely to try and tread on people's rights when there's other armed Americans with them. So we figured it's about damn time that or at least I figure that it's about damn time some heavily armed rednecks stood with fellow citizens.
And why are you protecting this store?
Well, I mean, this wasn't exactly a specified action.
We've been kind of, so we just kind of ended up here.
We've been moving around and just trying to see what's what without getting necessarily completely slapped by massive groups of people. And while we were walking, somebody mentioned that there were some guys at the back of us actually wanted to know if they were over here to go buy something. And they said that they're closed and they're defending their businesses. Oh yeah, Target's on fire.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we heard that. We're like, well, we better kit up and go see if these guys need help. And it turns out these guys are out here with machetes and shattered windows trying to keep looters out of the business because cops can't get in here. And so, I figure before they were cops, they were just Americans. So here we are.
Or, during the LA riots.
Or during the LA riots. Collateral damage, I guess.
Everyone protecting their own stuff. That's where, you got the term rooftop Korean.
So bottom line, justice for Floyd, and I hope they stop looting at some point. if there were more of us, we could go stop them from looting, but it's just us four.
Yeah, we definitely don't agree with the looting.
Yeah, no looting.
But we do agree with the cause for the protest.
Yeah, definite protesting.
Two gentlemen, two self-described rednecks, standing with rifles outside of a pawn shop right near. They could see the looting going on, and I think this will be unsurprising. But as I last checked, they prevented the store from being burnt out, destroyed, perhaps more violence occurring, individuals coming under risk. It's all it took. Two guys standing outside of it. Actually, I'm sorry. There were four of them, pardon me, in that video. Two of them self-described as rednecks, standing outside of a store, saying that they're just going to help out and protect it. They're not going to allow looting, which is a terrifying thing, to destroy someone's business and burn it to the ground and perhaps engage. There was violence against people. I mean, a woman in a wheelchair, for heaven's sake, was attacked by one of these angry mobs. Two guys standing outside prevent this from happening. Imagine if the cops were believed to be. No, the thing about those two guys, the two, I keep saying two, they're the ones talking. There were four of them, actually, four armed men. I'm quite sure that if you threw a brick at one of their heads or you surrounded them and they felt in fear of their lives, they would use their weapons to defend themselves, and they would be right to do so. But the protesters know that they can throw rocks at cops, they can burn down stores. I said it again. Darn it, the rioters. See, this is so the media propaganda is so pernicious. I've been reading about protests in this morning when it's not about protests. We're not even talking about protests. This is riots. These are riots. Have to use the proper terminology, but this is actually kind of an instruction in how the propaganda works. You read a word enough, you see it enough, and it seeps into your mind, and even when you don't want to say it, you end up saying it. But this shows you that a couple of armed patriots just trying to help out their fellow citizen can really step in and make a difference. And they were saying exactly what should be said. They think that what happened to George Floyd was atrocious. They support protests, but they don't support rioting and looting and the destruction of public property, the threats against people, burning down buildings. And unlike the cops in Minneapolis, these four men were willing to do something about it to actually help some people. Oh, look at that. I just want to say before we transition into some updates on what's going on with COVID-19 and all of that, there seems to be a media narrative that keeps popping up of, oh, why is it so? I've seen numerous journalists, Julia Yaffe is one of them. Why is this looting so bad in comparison to the guys who stormed the Michigan State Capitol with firearms? The people who went into the Michigan State Capitol didn't break any laws, didn't destroy anything, and didn't attack anyone. This is very obvious, but it just shows you, that there's a desire among the left-wing media to have some way of showing their sympathy, not for protesters, not for the family of George Floyd, which is completely understandable, and that's a sympathy that I have. No, their sympathy with the looters, though. That's, if you're a real dedicated leftist SJW, a social justice warrior, then you need to find a way to have sympathy for the people who are burning down stores and destroying things like this. And that's just appalling. And it's a dangerous, destructive game the media plays with all this. And it's truly very, very frustrating to watch. And it also gets them ratings. But there's an obvious separation between what happened in Minneapolis, lots of law breaking, destruction of property and violence, and what happened at the Michigan State House, where you had individuals who were lawfully carrying. Now, is it a judgment call that I would make to go carry in the Michigan State House like that? I wouldn't do it, but I don't condemn those who do. They're allowed. It's within law. It's the Second Amendment. So, and I understand also, look, I'm glad there are some people who early on in this process were speaking out against what is tyrannical. And what's going on in this country with this COVID-19 thing is tyrannical. There's no question about it. But there's, and if you're wondering where all this is going, I mean, here is a gentleman by the name of Vin Gupta on masks. Play clip 4, producer Mark.
I think we need a law, Willie. And the fact is, we've passed laws for banning indoor smoking because we know exposure to secondhand smoke is detrimental to your health. And you can't just rely on recommendations, unfortunately. Behaviors are behaviors. Human beings are peculiar, and a lot tend to be cynical. And I understand why people don't want to wear masks. I don't want to wear a mask if I could avoid it. I'm sure you don't want to wear a mask if you can avoid it. It's frightening to children. So, but now is the time for urgency. We do not have time to usher all Americans along on this policy. We have to be strong.
That's Dr. Vin Gupta on MSNBC, playing into this mask frenzy that's going on right now. Oh, and so now it has to be mandatory to wear a mask. There must be the force of law behind you wearing a mask. I want to be very clear about this. They have no argument that they will make in response to this point. If masks are compulsory as a function of law for you anywhere outside your home, which is what they are now demanding, why would masks ever not be compulsory outside the home? The seasonal flu hits us every year. There are millions and millions of cases, and there are tens of thousands of people who die every year. The fact that there are morons out there. There was one I came across on MSNBC, one of the dumber correspondents they have, who think, we have a vaccine for the flu. About 40% of the adult population any given year gets it. And it generally is a crapshoot whether it even works. And they say, we update the flu vaccine later in the season. Yeah, do you think people go get multiple? If they're at very high risk, maybe. But most people are like, I missed it this year. And you still have a lot of people who get it, a lot of people who die. If it saves just one life, that's how we've been pushed into this, right? That's the entry point of this tyranny. If it saves just one life. Well, we could save lives if masks work. With respiratory diseases, which I know we're supposed to take as an article of, not just an article of faith, we're supposed to believe that this is gospel. This is the absolute truth. Even though there's a CDC study that says, still up on the website, still says that for influenza, it doesn't really make much of a difference with masks. Now, do I think that if you have a full-on, plexiglass, self-contained breathing apparatus and everything, yeah, that'll prevent you from getting it, but a little piece of cloth across your mouth? Come on. But this is all about control. This is about making people do what the people in power want them to do, and it's also about forcing you to psychologically bend the knee here. And that's one of the reasons I find this so very troubling, because I think that mask wearing in public is stupid, an infringement on my rights, and just part of the hysteria and the attitude of overreach and control at any cost that has been so pervasive during this whole phenomenon. But if I go out and I wear a mask, then it becomes, you're doing what you're told. Oh, excuse me, mister, we shouldn't wear a mask. Here's a photo of you wearing a mask, right? You've complied. You're now a part of it. It's like, and then this is an extreme example, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. Well, I'll come up with a less extreme example. What's one of the ways that they'll put you, that they do gang initiation? How do you get a gang initiation? Well, a lot of times it's commit a serious crime, a felony, usually a violent felony. Well, once you've done that, everything else you're going to be subjected to in this gang, what other people are doing, you're a violent felon too. So how are you going to say, hey guys, we shouldn't do that? Don't do that thing. You're already a part of it. So with this mask mania, they want the law to force you all to do it. So then you're a hypocrite if you go out with a mask on because you're told you have to. They say, oh, you're protecting yourself. I mean, I come across this, too, with the idiot libs. I mean, I get targeted for this, but I don't care. But I've become somebody that they'll go after because I've been a skeptic of this for a long time, longer than almost anybody looking at this. And those of you listening to the show know that. For about 2 weeks, I was like, wow, we're in really bad shape here because all the numbers were telling us this is terrible. We're about to get, I watched from my window in real time as a hospital ship was floating by because our hospitals were going to be overwhelmed. Well, I had friends sending me photos from their window of hospitals being set up in Central Park to deal with all the overflow because all these people were going to be arriving and dying in the street before they could even get into the ER, and there wouldn't be enough ventilators. And this is what every government authority was telling us at that time. Now, I was somebody who said we should never, I put this out on Twitter, and I got a tremendous amount of heat and targeting. I said, no matter what, we should continue to go, no matter what we face after the initial 15 days, we should go back to work. I don't care what they're telling us. Oh, my gosh. And then they're all saying, oh, well, you're stuck in your fancy apartment. First of all, it's not fancy, it's small. But while you're stuck in your apartment, being all safe, you want other people. No, I want to be out. I'm out all the time. But they like to try to hit you with hypocrisy to undermine your argument. I'm going to stores. I'm not wearing masks wherever I can get away with it at this point. Now I can't even walk around my own building without a mask on. Common space. It's absolutely absurd. But they do want to make this mandatory after it went from not worth anyone's time to please do it to you better do it or else. And it went through that very quickly indeed. And now they want the law to mandate that you have to do this. I'm sorry. This is a very, very bad sign for those of us who value autonomy and freedom and individual rights. And it's also such a clear political symbol for the left now, too. Why do people explain to me why people have their avatars now on Twitter with a face mask on? I mean, maybe if they think it's just marking this point in history or something. I'm not saying everybody who does this is doing it in a weird way that's weirdly political. But for most people that I'm seeing, it's, look at me, I'm a mask wearer because I believe in the science. Really? You believe in the science? How many of the mask wearers have had a serology test to find out if they should wear a mask at all? You care so much about the science. Shouldn't you know if you've already been exposed, have antibodies, and therefore can neither infect others nor be infected yourself, according to science? No, that's too proactive. More fun to take selfies with your mask on, Biden 2020 mask on. It's absurd. It's outrageous. But there's also there's a bit of heat now coming on this one because people are, I think, recognizing the economic catastrophe. We're going to be feeling this for a long time, and folks are upset about it. And there are states that did not get hit hard by this, that should not have locked down. It was not worth it for them. Here is really a progressive elitist of the journo finance establishment, Andrew Sorkin and Joe Kernan on CNBC. They had quite a little squabble over this. Play clip 3.
I'm sorry? No, you're not. No, you're not, Joe. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead with the news.
You panicked about the market, panicked about COVID, panicked about the ventilators, panicked about the PPE, panicked about ever going out again, panicked that we'd ever get back to normal.
Joseph, you didn't panic about anything.
What good is it? Why
Joseph,
not help
100,000 people died.
keep their head? I understand that.
100,000 people died, Joe, and all you did was try to help your friend, the president.
Ooh. 100,000 people, he's yelling at him. It's like, dude, we all know that. That's just the way, you're going to handle everything now. That justifies, just that talking point justifies every decision that has been made and will be made. What if the decisions were wrong? What if it didn't save any lives? What if we're going to lose even more lives because of the decision to try to save lives with the lockdown that wasn't even the right decision because it didn't save lives? There is a real possibility that we didn't save any lives by doing this, and we will lose a lot of lives through our actions that did not save lives. Alcohol abuse, overdose from drugs, suicide, depression, undiagnosed cancer. I mean, just go through the list. No, but there were people who had a solid month of feeling really brave and virtuous. Lockdown forever, as long as it takes, until there's a vaccine. Lockdown. I believe in science. People say they believe in science. They don't even believe in reading. They don't know anything.
The nursing home, the obligation is on the nursing home to say, I can't take a COVID positive person. I'm too crowded, I'm too busy, I don't have enough PPE, whatever the answer is, doesn't even matter. It's if they say I can't take the person, they can't take the person. So that's how it works.
Oh, blame the nursing homes. That's the latest from Governor Cuomo. Let's understand something here, friends. He has gone from, we've seen Cuomo go from sexiest man alive, in the press. That's what they were saying. There were people, according to the New York Post, who were calling themselves Cuomo-sexuals and selling T-shirts and like thong underwear with Cuomo's face on it. I'm not making this up. This was actually happening because he was such a savior. Because he gave the briefing every day. And I'll explain what's going on in the briefing. So every day he would look at the slides. And eventually it would sort of turn into this, we're all in this together. And that was a means of, this is the thing that Cuomo is doing every day. And producer Mark points out there was I'm trying to think of how to say this. There was was that a real thing?
Yes, people legitimately thought that he had an object sticking out of his chest.
His chest area
that was pierced. I think people can put the clues together there.
Yeah. I remember seeing that. I wasn't sure that was I thought that was like a Babylon Bee thing, but maybe it was real. So, okay. Now we have the data in. And now we see what the results were. And what it all tells us is, sure enough, Cuomo did a horrible job. And he had this executive order on March 25th that said that nursing homes have to take COVID-positive patients back into the nursing home. This was because they had been told, or he believed, that they would run out of room in the hospitals. Do I say room funny? Snow Princess says I say room funny.
Yeah, you kind of say room.
Everyone always, I don't know why I say this word strange.
Do you watch Family Guy? That's how Stewie says it.
Oh, Stewie. I've got to work on my Stewie impersonation because it used to be pretty good.
Yeah, just speak. You do it.
Oh, thanks. So, going back here for a second to what Cuomo did. Cuomo made terrible decisions. And, the media was celebrating him and saying he's a hero and all this great stuff all the time. Cuomo was making terrible decisions for the state of New York and has dragged out the lockdown for much longer than it needed to be in New York State and here in New York City. And they don't have the numbers to back up what they were doing and the policy and everything else, and it's just been a debacle. But about a week, maybe 2 weeks ago, he started saying, well, it's the federal government's fault that was the CDC guidance. Now he's saying, oh, it's actually the fault of the nursing homes that took the people back. Well, why? How is it there? If he's signing an executive order, remember, now the governor of New York State thinks that he can tell you can't leave your home, you can't open your business, or the state troopers are going to come after you. If he signs an executive order saying you got to take people back, how is he then able to turn around and say, well, actually, we aren't going to take responsibility for this. It's on you in the nursing homes. I mean, the stats on what has happened here with nursing homes across the country are just, it's horrific beyond words. You have something along the lines, I'm trying to find it exactly, but you have, less than 2% of the country is in nursing homes. It's something like 1 point something percent, I believe, is in assisted living facilities of some kind. And the death toll from COVID-19 across the board is close to 40%. That's not 40% seniors. That's 40% in assisted living facilities. This was the big threat. This was we deployed our troops, so to speak. We put our phalanxes out there, out on the battlefield, prepared for this onslaught from COVID, and COVID actually did a flanking maneuver, swept around us, and went after, our camp in the rear and massacred people who were undefended, massacred our sick, our wounded, so to speak, in this battle analogy. We were not focused on the threat where it really was. And they can say all they want now about how, it's this person or this facility or that facility. No. You want all the power to tell us you got to stay in your home? You want the power to tell us what we can and can't do day in and day out? I have to wear a mask. I can't go to the store. I can't go live my life. Flatten the curve, all this stuff. You want that authority? You also, Governor Cuomo, had the authority to do better when it came to our seniors and to protect them. And you failed. You failed. This guy, it should cost him. I don't know if he's planning on running for re-election or not, but it should cost him re-election. I don't know if it will. Fortunately, New York politics, you never know what's really going on here, but we know the truth. There's no blame shifting that's going to work here, Cuomo.